today we are going to talk about the role of the AI engineer. And for this, this is actually a series of events. So this is the second event. The first event, if you want to find out more about the first event, it was already in this repo that I shared. All the links are there. You can go here at the end, at the bottom, and what is AI engineer, right? So this was the first event. I already turned this into an article. So we have an article, and today I'm going to focus on the second part. So defining the AI engineer role. And what we're going to talk today about is, first of all, I'm going to share how exactly I collected the data set for today's discussion. Then, so this is at the end was slightly less than 1,000 job descriptions. These job descriptions are from January this year, so this is super fresh. And then based on this data set I collected, I'm going to show you what skills companies are looking for in AI engineers, what responsibilities AI engineers have, and use cases that companies deal with, that they solve with AI. So that's the plan. And I want to start with describing the data set. For this data set, I used this built-in website. So this is the website that I used. And there is nothing special about this website. It just turned out that it's quite easy to scrape data from this data set. And yeah, I'm going to now, so I'm in Berlin. So it detected that I'm in Berlin. So I want to see jobs. And then, yeah, let's say, this is the first job I want to check. And I see that somebody raised hand. I don't know if you want to ask question or not. If you want to ask question, the best way to do this would be to use the Slido link that I shared. And then this is the link. And should be actually this present mode. So please use this link for asking questions. I shared it in the chat. But also if you go to Slido and write AEW or scan this QR code, you will be able to do that. So I'll continue. And so this is how it looks like. As I said, there is nothing special about this website. But what they have, maybe other websites also have this, is this part. So this is their source code, and they have this part. And in this part, if I open this and I format text, so we can see that this is structured part of this position. So we have here title, we have the description of this role, we have other things, right? But what I did is I went to this website. I typed in AI engineer, and I did it for multiple cities. I did it for Berlin. This is where I live. I did it for Amsterdam. I did it for London. I did it for Los Angeles and New York, I think. Right. So it was. I didn't go crazy with my search. I just selected a few cities, a few, like 3 in Europe, 2 in the States, just to understand what is the landscape of the job. And then at the end, I collected around. So I don't need this. All the data, by the way, is here. So if you want to try to reproduce this or you want to play with this data, you're more than welcome. So this is how the jobs looked like. So this was this CSV file with all these jobs that I found and the link to them, right? But then I started analyzing them and I noticed that there are many repetitions. So I removed a few noisy ones. And then I also deduplicated based on the job title and company name. So for example, here we have like this staff software engineer, AI and automation from Mozilla, right? So if this combination appears multiple times, I just drop it. I know that in some companies, there could be multiple AI engineers for different teams that might have different responsibilities, right? And different requirements. But I thought it would be easier to just deduplicate based on that, right? So then I wouldn't need to do any extra cleaning, right? To understand what is duplicate, what is not. So for me, I just did that. And then the job itself, we have the link, and I showed view the source code. So from this structured part, I was able to extract quite a few things. If you're interested in looking at the scrapers that I used, you can find them there. It's not like super, I'm not very proud of this code. It's not super organized. So actually, like after I extracted the data, it was like a one-off throwaway thing. But what I did eventually with this is I extracted data that looked like that. So this is the data I extracted from each of these rows that I showed. So it looked like this. So this is nothing else but just scraped data that is in machine readable format. So there is not, I didn't do any special preprocessing here. So this is just the description from this job portal, right? So this was the next step. And after that, for each of these things, I used an LLM and I turned this raw scrape data into something that I could actually use for analysis, which looked like that. So let's take this one. So here I extracted company name, some information about the company, some information about the position, then the type of the position. So because what I found out when I was analyzing these roles is that, like maybe we can see it here. Can I go back? Yeah. So here, some of these positions, they are not necessarily AI engineer, right? So for example, here, principally engineer AI systems. Like we don't really know what it means unless we, I don't know if it's still available, but unless we go there, we don't really know what this may mean, right? So who is this principal engineer? So what I did also when I was analyzing these positions is I asked an LLM when it was producing structured data to tell me whether this is AI first job, AI support job, or machine learning job, right? There are some other classification classes, but for me, these were the main categories, right? Because sometimes, like for example, this is a product, this is a backend role. Even though it says AI product engineer, it says this role is building backend infrastructure, API, and observability platforms for AI ML systems. That's enabler role. So I asked, so first of all, I defined the criteria, how do you distinguish between AI first and AI support roles? And then I also asked LLM to explain its reasoning, like why exactly it thinks that this is AI support. So this is typically pretty helpful to help LLM to make better choice, right? Better decision. And then I extracted responsibilities in this as a nice list, right? So then there was large description, right? And then instead of just using this large description, we clearly see that these are the responsibilities. And use cases, this is also quite interesting. How exactly is this company in this particular team is using AI, right? So what are they doing? And then skills. So skills, I split skills into different categories. So the categories are GenAI skills, machine learning skills, web development skills, database skills, data. Data is like generic data, like data engineering stuff. Cloud skills, operational skills, languages, domain and other skills, right? So for example, here they say for GenAI, they need the knowledge of LLMs, right? So this is from what we can see here, like it's kind of clear that this is not really an AI first role, right? It's more like a supporting role for AI engineers, right? So I did this extraction for all the roles. And at the end, we ended up with 800 something. Where do we have it? This number. So like almost 900 job descriptions, right? So this is the basis for today's discussion, right? So this is the basis for all the analysis I am going to show you today. I'm going to share with you today. And I already shared a link with you here to the first part, to the first section of this event. What is happening? Here. So I don't know if you attended the first event in this series, but here this was my personal view, my personal definition of who an AI engineer is. And so today, with both you and I, we will look at how far this definition is from the actual data. Well, since I already did this analysis, it's not too far, but it's also interesting to see what is actually happening in the industry, right? So I think I told you all about this. And then let's look at the analysis. And by the way, all this analysis, so first of all the data, I already showed you all the data. Then we have, job market. Then we have analysis. So if you're interested in reproducing it, there is a Jupyter notebook that contains like this thing that first turns these AI, YAML files into a data frame and then checks all these things, right? So this is something you can also play with. And perhaps maybe you have some other questions that I didn't ask and didn't analyze. So then you're free to just get this data and do whatever you want with this data. So the first thing I wanted to see is how many AI first roles are there. And just a reminder, AI first role, the way I define it, is people who actually work with AI. It's not somebody who is supporting the AI engineers, but somebody who is actually doing AI work, right? And again, remember, the way I collected this data set is I went to this built-in website and I put AI engineer here, right? And then some other jobs also popped up, right? So this is important because from what we see, only 70% of these jobs were actually AI first. So some of them, all of them were kind of AI related, right? Not there were very, very few that were completely unrelated to AI, and I removed them in the first pass. They had this weird title, AI trainer or something. I just removed all of them in one pass, and that was it, right? So they are all AI related, but to different degree. So what we have here in this data set is 70 are AI first, then AI support. And also there are companies who take traditional ML engineers, traditional machine learning roles, and say that they are AI engineers, right? So this is also, I can see this in the data set, that sometimes the role is purely ML engineering, even though it's called AI engineering. And I think there is a good example. I think this is the very first role here, applied AI engineer researcher, is actually an ML first role, because what they need to do is TensorFlow and PyTorch. They don't really need to do any GenAI and so on. Well, at least my definition of AI role is these days, this is mostly working with GenAI. I know that the broader definition of AI includes machine learning and things like that. But these days, I usually when I hear about AI, for me, it's more like Gen AI rather than traditional machine learning, right? But there are some roles that are called AI engineers, although they are pure ML engineers, right? So this was the first question I checked. And then I was also interested in knowing how many are their research roles, right? So, and for researchers, so I was just looking at if they have things like SOTA, novel algorithms, publishing papers, things like that, right? And only a tiny fraction of them were research roles, which is kind of expected because we didn't look for research scientists or AI scientists or whatever. We were looking for AI engineers, which is like, this is more like just some noise in the data, right? So like, actually, I wouldn't expect any researchers to pop up here, but we see that sometimes it happens. Okay, and now, so this was just, first glance at the data. Now I wanted to look at the skills, but I see that there are 13 questions. I want to quickly go through messages in chat. I want to quickly go through them to see if there are anything that I should check. Okay, I just see advertising for some WhatsApp group. Okay. So I see that there is a question, Kate. Maybe it's better if you use the Slido link, this one. So then we will have everything in one place, so I will not need to go through the chat in order to find your question. And yeah, so somebody who's asking if they are late, you're not late. We're just getting started. I described the background, but now I want to show what I actually found out. Like this is, I think, the most important part. What kind of skills are required? And again, I already showed you the Jupyter notebook, but then also if you want to read it later, there is this skills MD file, which describes all the finding in the Markdown format. So right now I'm showing you the slides, but this is kind of the same, just in a different representation, right? Again, this is the link. The way you find this, you scroll down, and then you have this skill analysis and other things. And by the way, this repo is still work in progress. There are some things that are a bit raw. But yeah, my goal for this repo is to collect all the useful information about AI engineering roles and put it here together. So right now, this part with role, at least this part, is pretty complete. So you can use it as this. Some things are still work in progress. But anyways, let me continue. So this is the interesting part. And the most interesting part, the pattern that I see in the data appearing a lot is RAG. So most of the jobs, and I think we had like 70% AI engineer jobs, right? So half of them require RAG, even more of that, right? So they mention RAG explicitly, but even if they don't mention explicitly, I think this could be assumed. So this is, you have some data and you don't use AI in like you need data to use AI, right? So you don't just apply AI to something, you apply it to your data. And for that you need RAG, right? So it's collecting connecting LLMs to your data. And it also means that you need to set up like all these processes to do RAG. So this is the number one pattern that we see in data, that this is the number one application of AI that AI engineers do, right? And another thing I noticed that, like if we look at
Annoying me
this,
these days a lot.
yeah, hi,
Apologies, sorry.
yeah, yeah. Please see if you have questions. It's better to use this. Don't shout. Okay. Um. So here, if we look at the skills, maybe I open a different one, right? And then we have the skills, right? Yeah, that's again not the great one. So I want to. Okay, so this is like a proper AI engineer, at least I think. So you see, we have these Gen AI roles, but also there are some other roles, right? So we have ML skills, Gen AI skills, but also we have other skills, machine learning skills, web skills, database skills, operational skills, languages, right? Although I would say that this is very, very focused on AI, except, yeah, they use JavaScript or TypeScript, not Python, but this is very AI focused. But what I did here is I just checked, I just wanted to see how many roles in addition to Gen AI have something else. And most of them, let me close this so it's not distracting. So most of them, 93%, they need things beyond Gen AI. So only 1% had pure Gen AI skills and nothing else. The rest had something else. So the other things that I see in the data that AI engineers need front-end skills, AI engineers need back-end skills, and sometimes they need both skills. But yeah, it's just front-end and back-end, but there are some other things like databases, data. So in general, you can see that expectations from AI engineers that it's a full stack role, right? So you kind of, in addition to not just, but in addition to knowing the core AI skills, which is like RAG and other things, you're also expected to know other things. And these are the top skills. Knowing Python, yes, Python is the language for AI, even though like TypeScript is catching up, as we can see, like many people use TypeScript, not Python. And then knowing cloud, knowing Docker, knowing CI/CD, knowing Kubernetes is important, right? So you don't just apply AI in isolation, you also need to know other things like, okay, how do you package it in Docker? How do you write tests and put them in CI/CD? How you deploy this in Kubernetes? So as we can see that just knowing Python and being able to call OpenAI is not enough. You need to know more things. And when it comes to specifically to GenAI, we talked about RAG, then other skills, and this is purely based on the description, right? So on the job description. So they are prompt engineering, LLMs. This is very interesting. I don't exactly know what they mean, but like, yeah. So they need to know LLMs. By this, I think they mean is like you need to know how to communicate with OpenAI or Anthropic or something else. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to know how LLMs work under the hood. Although for some companies it may mean exactly that, right? So it really depends. So these LLMs could be like a bit overloaded. It's not really clear what it means. So knowing how LLMs work under the hood may be important if the company is doing some sort of fine tuning, or like it's important for them that you know the internals. So then you can uh, do something with these model files in order to, uh, I don't know, do something useful, right? But we will see later in how many cases this happens. Then LangChain is the most popular framework, agentic framework. Then, yeah, just agents, I guess. Uh, So in some cases, I see that they implicitly mention agents without saying agents, but sometimes, yeah, it's agents. Uh, and then LangChain, LangGraph, LlamaIndex, these are the most popular frameworks that I mentioned. Yeah, here. So for example, we see others, but from my anecdotal evidence, I know many companies don't use these frameworks, they use something else. Perhaps these companies just don't include the name of the framework because, in my personal opinion, this is really secondary. Like, it doesn't really matter if you don't know LangChain or it's some other framework, but some companies explicitly put this in the requirements. So probably, maybe for these companies, it's important. Maybe they just wanted to put something in the requirements. But yeah, of course, many it doesn't mean that only this amount of companies use LangChain. Maybe somebody just didn't include it. Or there are other frameworks. Like, for example, my favorite framework is Pydantic AI. It's not here, but it doesn't mean it's not popular. So maybe people who use Pydantic AI, they just thought it doesn't make sense to include this in the description. So, but from raw data, from what we saw, LangChain is the most popular. But I think many of you already knew that this is the case. And also, what is interesting is many AI engineers require machine learning knowledge. And I have an explanation for that. So, why I think this is the case, why many AI engineers need machine learning knowledge. Because I think these AI engineers they appeared in machine learning teams. So there was a machine learning team, they were already doing some things. And then AI appeared a few years ago. They started to have AI use cases, but the machine learning use cases didn't go anywhere, right? So they are still there. And that's why for these teams, when they hire, they want also people not just know how to communicate with OpenAI, right? But they also want to know how to do machine learning, like more traditional machine learning. That's why. So this is my explanation. I think this is the case. Um, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is my hunch, right? So we still have a lot of machine learning use cases, and when companies hire AI engineers, they want them to also be able to continue working on machine learning. And then finally, we were talking about these LLMs. Maybe you also heard about fine tuning, and fine tuning is not the easiest topic, right? And it requires many things. Like if you just want to get, I don't know, 101 introduction to AI, to Gen AI, usually it just making calls to OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, right? You don't need to do more. And then, of course, building everything around that. But um, you also see, like when you watch webinars, videos online, you see that people talk about fine tuning. And for fine tuning, you need to know more than just making calls to an LLM provider, right? So you need to know like a bit of how LLMs work under the hood, how exactly to fine tune them, and things like that. And to me, it seemed like the question I had, like how important is fine tuning for starting with AI engineering, right? Because it seemed to me many people talk about this online and social media, but how actually it is important, right? And it looks like mm, it's not really important, right? So in many cases they don't mention, and only like in 25 jobs they say, okay, like yeah, we fine tune. So and compare it with 30% where they need RAG or 35%. So if you're just getting started with AI engineering, you shouldn't really go in depth into this LLM world, like and understand really how LLM works and do fine tuning and all this kind of stuff. So for me, the path is you first figure out like things like RAG, agents, things like that, where you don't necessarily even need to know how LLMs work under the hood. I mean, in details. Some knowledge is helpful, right? But this shouldn't be the focus at the beginning. So at least this is my interpretation of that. And I was always suspecting that, but I'm very happy to see a confirmation in data about that. So fine tuning is a niche skill, right? But also, what is more important, right? Fine tuning is, as we see, is not important, but what is really important is being able to productionize what you built, right? So we see that things like Docker, CI/CD, Kubernetes, MLOps, Terraform, they are mentioned in job descriptions quite often. And this is not a surprise because AI engineer is first an engineer and then the specialization, right? So from AI engineers, the expectations engineering wise are the same as from ML engineers, from software engineers, backend engineers, and so on, right? So they need to be engineers. And when it comes to engineering, engineers need to know how to productionize whatever they write, right? And how to operate, like do all this ops stuff, which is why like seeing things like Docker, CI/CD, Kubernetes is not a big surprise to me personally, right? And then another thing is many companies, they require evaluation. So when you build your rack, this is cool, but this is you shouldn't stop at that, and you should understand how you evaluate the rack because many companies mention that in one way or another. So it's not like one skill that you have, but like I had to combine many different keywords to understand for how many companies evaluation is important. And this is another thing. So it's not just enough to learn RAG and agents, you also need to know how to evaluate what you build. Okay, and then some other things. Let me check how much time we have. So perhaps like this all you can go through yourself. I guess I'll share the slides. And also like there's this markdown document where you can read that, or you can also experiment with this data yourself. Maybe a few things before we check the questions is like cloud platform. We can clearly see that AWS is the leader, but also like there are other platforms. So, if you ask me, it doesn't really matter which platform you use. So you can just use whatever you want. And then, but if you don't have any preferences, I would go with AWS, right? Programming language, we talked about this. And yeah, so what I want to do now, before we continue to part 2 and part 3, I want to check questions. Because for me, like this would be much more interesting to do that. But I need like 30 seconds because I want to get some water. I don't have some water and I'm maybe thirsty because I've been talking so long. So I will be back very quickly. Yeah, I'm back. Actually, for this webinar, I planned 1.5 hours. I know it's long, but you can, like, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I'd rather spend time on your questions rather than on the what I prepared, because I think I already showed you the most important part. And for me, the most important part is we see here. Maybe let me summarize quickly. So we saw RAG. RAG is important, right? So there are, like, if you want to start learning AI, you should start with RAG. Then being full stack is useful. So if you're already an engineer, you already know most of these things. So you just added an AI on top of that and you're good. Um, then, yeah, well, knowing some machine learning helps. And productionizing is important and evaluation. Like if you're already an engineer, if you're transitioning to AI from engineering, so you should look at RAG, you should look at agents, and you should look at evaluation, right? So this is what I see from this data. And then if you're not sure which cloud platform to use, go with AWS. Okay, so let's take a look at questions. So question from Nareen. How much data did you scrape and what do you think the sample is enough to support your conclusion? What are the limitations of this data and any outliers? So how much data, I think I answered, right? Sample enough or not? I mean, the more the better, but I think 800 is not insignificant, right? So I think it's enough. At least, like if I want to make some conclusions about these particular cities and this particular time, and the time being January 2026, and cities being Los Angeles, New York, Amsterdam, London, and Berlin, then yes, right? If I want to extrapolate outside of this, then probably no. I mean, 50-50, right? So I would need more data, but I also suspect that these patterns generalize, right? Especially if we talk about New York. So New York is, how to say, sets the trends, right? So I think it was an important city to include. Um, and I included Europe because I live in Europe. But I think if we talk about other countries, if we talk about Asia or Africa, probably you will see similar patterns. I'm not sure, but you have the code, you can reproduce it. But I think since the Americans, the US sets the trends, and in Europe we follow. So I think it should be generalizable. But of course, I need data to say that for sure. Based on what you've seen so far, would you say an AI engineer is essentially a software engineer who knows how to productionize AI? Yes, I think it's very accurate description. So to me, when you say engineer, be it data engineer, ML engineer, AI engineer, so first of all, they are software engineers, right? And then second, they have specialization. So data engineers specialize in data, ML engineers specialize in machine learning, and AI engineers specialize in AI, right? But they are all software engineers. So they need to know how to write tests. They need to know CI/CD. They need to know Docker. They need to know like how to deploy the stuff. So yes, I think that's true, which is good news for software engineers. So if you're already a software engineer, for you becoming an AI engineer is not that difficult, right? So you would need to spend like maybe 3-4 months learning about these core AI skills that I mentioned, like RAG, agents, evaluation. And then you just focus on these skills, you work on projects, and then that's it, right? Versus if you're somebody who's not coming from this software engineering background, for them, it would require more effort, right? Because not only you'll need to learn about AI, but also you'll need to learn about all other things that they don't have because they're not coming from the software engineering background. So yeah, I would say this is, from what I see, this is an accurate description. Would an AI engineer be responsible for building and maintaining a context layer for AI tools, or is that a separate role? So, Lindsay, I need to know what exactly you mean by context layer for AI tools, because it may mean different things. So, context layer could be how you build your prompts, right? Then how you inject things into your prompt. Like, for example, if you use your agents use different tools and you have too many tools or you have MCP, knowing which MCP tools are which tools to include would be probably context engineering, right? Or using RAG as context engineering, or having some sort of memory as context engineering. And then memory could be like, I don't know, you just keep some things in files, or could be using some graph database. But regardless of that, I think what I described is this would fall within the domain of AI engineering. two, in my opinion, right? I am speaking just from my experience, and this is my personal view. So I cannot quickly just open a notebook and answer this question with data support. So for that, I would need to think like how exactly I can check this in data. But the data is there. We can see how exactly context is mentioned there, context engineering, these things like this. But to me, it seems like it's AI engineering. And maybe for AI tools, you mean tools like Claude, right? Claude Code and things like that. Um, and maybe things like skills and commands and things like that. So I think this is specific to using this specific tool, right? So I don't know. Let me see if there's anything in chat. Okay, so I'll check chat later, but I'll focus on this. For aspiring AI engineers, how valuable is experience with Vertex AI? Is there real demand for these managed AI platforms or mostly general cloud skills? So Vertex AI is, I think, from Google, right? Yeah. So this is machine learning models, right? So this is probably similar to SageMaker in AWS. So this is focus for ML. So for engineering, I wouldn't say this is super important. But also for ML engineers, like in practice, I saw teams that use these tools as like for ML use cases. But there are also so many teams don't really use these tools. So um, this could be valuable if you're coming from this background of ML and you have the skill with Vertex AI, but it doesn't mean you'll use it. So probably you will use something else, right? So you'll probably use like in case of Google, they have their own Gen AI platform. So it's more likely that you use that. And I see that somebody is trying to draw something on the screen. Please don't. I don't know how I can remove this, but yeah, maybe it's better if you don't draw anything on the screen. Mm. Okay, so it's mostly general cloud skills, I would say. Yeah. Like, okay, you built your agent, like where do you host your agent, right? You probably host it as a microservice. How do you do this? Like what tools you use for that? So this, in my opinion, is more valuable. And in most cases, you don't need to think about serving the LLM model with serving the LLM yourself. So you probably use a provider, be it OpenAI, Anthropic, or maybe you use it through cloud services like, I don't know, on Azure maybe, or through Bedrock on AWS, right? So, and then at the end, you don't think about scaling the LLMs, you think about your services, right? And this is, I think, important. There was a question about data scientists. Did I just mark it as, let me quickly check if I have archive questions. So maybe I accidentally pressed, yeah, this one, sorry. Does it make sense for a data analyst scientist with Kubernetes Docker experience to think about transitioning to AI engineering? Well, whether it makes sense for you personally, I don't know. So it's a very hard question to answer for me because you know better what you enjoy. So it looks like a very nice thing in general. And knowing how to use these tools, like how you can solve your problem and how you can integrate AI into product is quite useful. And maybe at the beginning, I should have started uh, this session by defining who AI engineer is. Right? I didn't do this. I did this in the previous session, but maybe let me reiterate. So in my opinion, an AI engineer is the engineer who is bringing AI into the product, who is making possible to use AI in the product, right? So this is their main responsibility, but it doesn't mean other roles cannot do this, right? So data scientists are very well equipped with doing some things that AI engineers do. And let's say you already work as a data scientist and I don't know, you train XGBoost models or you train some other models. You already have the mindset that you need in order to use AI properly, right? So instead of training the model yourself, you would specify the prompt, you would make a call, to OpenAI or whatever you use. But then this mindset of like, I don't know, there are some knobs. I tune these knobs and I see what happens. And then I have this evaluation data set that I use to not just rely on my gut feeling, but also I want my decision to be data driven. So this is data scientist, well, perhaps data analyst you already have, right? And this is what you should build on, because this is something that the other engineers don't necessarily have. For them, they need to learn this. But you as a data scientist, you already have that. And if you think that this sounds interesting, like being able to use AI in order like to integrate AI into products and just in general know it, I see no reason not to go for it. And in fact, probably at your workplace, um, you can already start using AI without even switching the title. You can still continue being data scientist, but start using AI, right? And then eventually, if you think you enjoy it, you can take more and more engineering tasks. Um, and then eventually, like it doesn't really matter how the company calls you, but if you're doing AI engineering stuff and you enjoy doing it, then that's good enough, right? So, but again, like whether it makes sense to for you personally to transition, I don't know. But I find this field quite interesting. So, and I have experience in data science. My background is in data science. So for me, this is pretty interesting. Is the era of BS lead code interviews finished, or do we still need to go through stupid exercises that can be solved with a prompt by a coding agent? Okay, so today we're just talking about job descriptions. So we will talk about interviews in the next videos, in the next events. I still need to collect some data for that. From my anecdotal experience, from what I saw, this is changing, but not everywhere. You still, in many cases, will need to go through these BS lead code interviews. Some companies allow to use coding agents. Some companies don't allow using coding agents. And but there is a trend that some companies say, "Hey, like you can use whatever tool you want, but please explain me what you're going to do. Like this is the task you want to do, or you need to do, but explain me, like walk me through the solution, right?" So this is the kind of interviews that appear more and more often. But still, in some cases, you'll have the classical whiteboard interview where you need to rotate a linked list or something, right? So I still see these things. And um, the reasoning there why this is the case, the idea is like, what if you don't have your AI? Like, what if, I don't know, internet is down? Will you still be able to work? Uh, I don't know. I'm just making things up, but sometimes maybe it's important to make sure that people still be able to program. Whether lead code is a good way to check that, probably not. But companies still do this, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon from
05
what I see. Okay. How will you differentiate AI engineer and ML engineer? I have seen so many job descriptions using them interchangeably. Yeah, well, I think at the beginning I mentioned that, right? So um, for this analysis, right, I just asked an LLM to classify them between different categories. And to me, AI engineer is somebody who is working with GenAI. Traditionally, ML falls within the AI kind of circle. Like you have this big circle, which is AI, then smaller circle, which is machine learning, right? And then even smaller circle, which is deep learning, right? So this is how it's been traditionally. But today, I would say, like when I hear AI engineer, for me, it means that this person is working with Gen AI technologies such as LLMs, right? Not necessarily with machine learning. So this is how I do this. Some companies, they are jumping kind of the hype train and say, hey, like all our ML engineers are now AI engineers. And then you open this AI engineering position and you want to work with Gen AI and you see traditional ML. It happens too. And I see this in data too, right? And indeed, some use interchangeably, some do this on purpose. Also, there is other way, right? So sometimes you see a position for data science, but inside you have Gen AI skills and Gen AI responsibilities. Um, so yeah. Are software engineering jobs disappearing or they are still safe as tools like Claude Code or Codex agents start hard handling the coding part of software. Okay, in order to answer this question, I'll quickly stop sharing my screen because I want to open my Telegram. And in my Telegram, recently a friend of mine sent me an interesting link. So I want to find this link and show it to you. So for that, I need to stop sharing my screen. Okay, I found the link. I'm going to share this link. First, I'm going to share my screen with you. And now I'm going to share this link with you all here. So this is the link. So somebody did something similar to me, but on larger scale. So they took a lot of jobs, 180 million to be more precise, across 2 years, right? Or, yeah, well, many years. And what they wanted to see is how it changed, like how 2025 compares to 2024, right? Because the hypothesis here is that AI is taking our jobs, right? Is it true? So that's the main hypothesis, right? And what they did is they analyzed, they took a look at the number of positions posted in 2025 and 2024, and they looked at the difference, right? Like to see how much job market dropped. And let me scroll down. So I think this is the interesting part, right? So let me zoom in. So these jobs, so this is a positive. So positive difference. It means that there were more positions with this title in 2025 compared to 2024. And you can see that, okay, I don't know who is commissioning engineer. More interesting, director legal. So directors are important. But okay, data engineering, right? Machine learning engineering. Then we have software engineering. I don't know why there is this director comma, but from what I see, machine learning engineering is the number one growing job, despite all this AI stuff, right? So I don't know what you can take from this, but to me, it seems like, well, the question is originally about software engineering, but I don't think software engineers are going to be made redundant anytime soon. Just today, I was working on building something with Claude Code, and this is Opus 4.6. And like I asked it to do something, and then I come back and I see that it decided not to do it because it's too complex. It's too complicated. It just said, no, it's too complex, but it would require you writing this, this, and this. I'm not doing this. And I was like, okay, censored. But like I was swearing in my mind. And it's like, why? Like, and then I said, do it. And then it was like, okay, I will do it. So, like, okay, maybe tooling will improve, but this is just a case from today. But sometimes they remove tests and they say, like, yeah, when I ask it to make CI green and make all tests pass, they would just remove tests and report, hey, all 90 tests now pass. And I'm not like there were 100 tests just 1 hour ago. What happened with the remaining 10? And it was like, yeah, I kind of removed them because they were failing. So yeah, so this Claude Code and Codex, they are cool, but somebody still needs to look at this. Like imagine you have, I don't know, 10 juniors who are very enthusiastic, but you as an engineer need to uh, put your project in such a way that these 10 enthusiastic juniors cannot destroy your production, right? So then you have to have like all these processes, all these review processes and things like that in place in order to make sure it doesn't happen. Of course, the question is like, can you have agents monitoring other agents? And the answer is yes, but still you need to set this up and you need to monitor that these things don't go sideways, right? And I think software engineers are still needed for that. And today, cloud costs not very, like it's not very expensive. Like the most expensive plan is 200 per month, which is like if you really use it a lot, it's nothing. But one day, the free lunch could be over. And then, because if you translate it to real cost, how much you would really pay for API calls, it would be like 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more. And then it will be not simply, how to say, reasonable, justifiable to use that much these tools, to rely that much on these tools, right? So you either spend, I don't know, 10,000 on tokens, or you write some things by hand, right? So we will see like where the industry is going, but my opinion is that it's not going away anytime soon. Given AI coding, my hypothesis is that software engineering will increasingly be built by people with product management mindset who also implement. Yeah, I think I'm turning into a product manager right now. But also, like as I mentioned, software engineering skills are very important because I want to build tests. I want to build, I want to have how to say, the process where agents contribute in such a way that it's very difficult to break things. So I want to have tests, I want to have hooks, I want to have code reviews, I want to have dev environment, I want to have prod environment, I want to have CI/CD, and I want to have on-call agent that wakes up when CI goes red and fixes it, goes to like fixes it and makes it green, right? So in order to set this up, you need to know what it is, right? And if you're an engineer, you know this because you have set this up when working with people. So when you work with agents, you should also be able to set this up. So uh, product manager, yes, because you need to be very concrete and very clear in what you want to achieve, right? So you need to have a very good specification, but also, yeah, you need to design your project in such a way that it's resistant. Do you think there is a sizable market in AI for data engineers focusing on RAG and vector databases? I think yes, because we saw that 35%, so RAG is required. And if you think about RAG, that for RAG, what we need, so on the surface, RAG is very simple. They have a code editor here. Right? So if I want to implement RAG, it would be, so this would be my RAG function. So this would be user input, right? And then I do search, we'll call it search result. Search with user input, right? Then second thing, I'll do prompt. Prompt would be, yeah, build prompt, user input and search results. And then I invoke it with LLM and then I return it to the user, right? So this is RAG, just these 3 lines of code, right? So this is fairly easy, right? So you build prompt, whatever search returns, you put it inside prompt, you send this to LLM. So this part is not that complicated, but this part is, because what you need to have is some sort of search index, right? So which not only responds reliably, but also you need the data needs to end there somehow, right? It doesn't just magically appears there. So some process needs to put this data, and it needs to put this data there reliably. And this is nothing else but data engineering job, right? Because you as data engineer have been doing this kind of things for ages, right? So you are putting data from one place, from the source to another place, which is like your destination. And this is typically, I don't know, a data warehouse or something. So in this case, it could be Elasticsearch or some vector database or something else, right? So this is nothing else but pure data engineering, just rebranded differently. And since we saw in how many cases RAG is used, so then this is the answer, right? So then, like even here, if we don't talk about RAG, but we talk about agents, so then we have agents, right? So let's say we have our search agent, right? And then when we say that this agent, we give this agent tools, right? And then one of the tools is this search tool, right? So even if we move away from classical RAG and I don't know why I cannot change it to just tool to search. So even if we just talk about classical RAG, yes, there's a lot of data engineering. But if we move away from classical RAG to, I don't know, agentic RAG to agentic search, we still have this, like the database is not going anywhere, right? And this is a very important part of building agents these days, because agents, they don't live in isolation. They need to interact with the data, and the data they interact with needs like it needs to be there, right? It needs to be in the database. It needs to be in the search index, right? It doesn't just appear there magically. So you, as a data engineer, I think there is a lot of yeah, this is definitely a sizable market from what I see, because you already have the skills that are needed, and the skills are in demand, right? So at least this is my personal experience, and this is what I see in data. And I recently spoke with a data engineer who's doing exactly that. His title is officially still data engineer, but he's working just on AI stuff. I'm pursuing my master's in AI. While learning the foundation is great, what additional skills should I add to my portfolio? Um, okay, so wait. Um, so I'm just thinking, yeah, this one you definitely should do. I don't know if at university you learn this, but this is what you should start with. And then I have this slide here, the stack, right? So we have this AI stuff. So you have all these, I don't know, LangChains and whatnot. You have the APIs, but everything in front of it, everything that user interacts with, and everything behind it, like an infrastructure, vector databases. I don't know if you learned this at university, but this is a very good idea to look at these things too. So then you would be like, if you cover all these things, you would be full stack, right? And here, this is what you probably learned at university. Probably at university, you learn a little more, so you don't really um, learn to interact with them. I'm just assuming, I don't know, maybe your university is different. But probably you learn like fundamental skills, like how these LLMs work, like how, I don't know, the sampling techniques and whatnot, like how they work under the hood. But all the things around, like, okay, now you know how this LLM works, but like, how do you testing? How do you do evaluation? How do you do monitoring? And this is just still these two things, right? We're not talking about other things. Like how do you do all that? This is important. So these are the core engineering skills, core AI engineering skills, like testing, evaluating, monitoring, plus the other things that we saw in data that, yeah, you need these cloud platform skills, you need to know databases, you need to know, yeah, production skills. And I think maybe for now, I'll quickly continue with the slides, right? We still have half an hour. Or what I will do now is I'll just quickly go through the slides. I really enjoy asking your questions, but maybe you will find this part is also useful. Because in addition to just looking at the skills, because the first part of the talk, I looked primarily on these things, right? Just the skills. But we also have responsibilities and we also have use cases. So this is something I also wanted to look at. And while for the first part, this was using Jupyter and actually analyzing this data is a little bit more difficult. That's why I used an LLM. And for all responsibilities, I just concatenated all the responsibilities together in one single file. And then I used Claude Code to explain me to find patterns there, right? So what I'm going to tell you now is based on this kind of research, this kind of like concatenated file, and then conversation with AI agent. Right. So when I took all these responsibilities, it was a fairly large data set. And I'm going to classify these responsibilities into very common, and not so common, right? And more rare. So building AI system is the most common responsibilities. So the words that you see there are like build, design, deploy, create, develop, right? So the focus is really on building, right? And here, like there is some business requirements, but then you have to have like a reliable system, right? So this is the most common thing. And this is, we shouldn't be surprised because at the end, AI engineers are engineers build things. So here we have building AI system. So this is kind of similar building productionizing, but here I would say building is more like using this is like the core AI skill, right? The core AI engineering skill. But here this is like, okay, now you have your agent. What's next, right? So how do you make it really production ready? Which is like all these processes, like ops processes, like I don't know, testing, QA, monitoring, um, and stuff like that, right? So evaluation and quality, also very common. So I would say this is very similar to this one, but here you build your agent, but here your agent goes to production and you want to understand what's happening in production, right? So does it perform well? Um, you collect logs, with these logs, you do something like you create evaluation frameworks, you understand what is really happening, right? So this is also quite common. Provider APIs. So in most cases, you don't host your LLMs yourself, and you don't build your LLMs yourself. You just use OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and so on to do that. RAG, we talked about RAG, but in responsibilities, they talk in more details into that, like what exactly they do with RAG, what kind of RAG. So whether it's processing PDFs, Word, other types of data, right? But it's still RAG, right? And I think did we talk about context engineering? So yeah, here we go. We also have that because like when you have an agent and this agent, you give the search tool to this agent and this agent is starting to explore your search database, your knowledge database, then it can easily overuse the context and fill the context with things. So you need to know how to manage it if we like here, if we talk about agentic search, not just plain RAG. But also, I guess, in playing around Iraq, you need to know like chunking and stuff, which I think, in my opinion, chunking becomes less and less important because now we have agents, and agents can do very good exploration of our knowledge bases without the need for chunking. Data processing. So these were very common. Now we're talking about common things, right? So again, common because how often they appear in responsibilities, right? So if we look at skills, RAG is the most common skill, but in responsibilities, like it's aggregated differently. That's why maybe RAG comes only, I don't know, fourth. Um, yeah. So data processing. Yeah, goes hand in hand with RAG, and we had this question about data engineering, right? So this is what needs to happen. We need to process our data, and who, if not data engineers, are the best people to do that. Collaboration. This is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. You collaborate with other people. Perhaps you also collaborate with AI. But yeah, I'm just making this up, but here, yeah, it's about processes, right? But also, if you know how to organize these processes with people, and it goes back to this thing we were talking about when I was answering the question. So I think if you know how to organize things with people, then you also will know how to organize work with AI agents. Infrastructure. Okay, so like for these GPU clusters, this is when you need to serve LLM yourself, but this is a kind of cluster of things, right? So this is not just so here you architect scalable distributed systems. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to GPUs. Sometimes you need, sometimes you don't, right? But yeah, here is more like the underlying infrastructure work. Agents, yeah, pretty common. So all this agentic stuff. And less common are these things. So front end. So maybe at the beginning I was saying that hey, AI engineer is a full stack role. While it is true, we can see this in data. It's not expected by default that the AI engineer would do front end stuff, right? But today, since we all have these AI tools, we have a Claude Code and whatnot. It's not impossible for an AI engineer to actually take care of these things sometimes. But then, since I was talking about here about like this building GPU clusters and inference infrastructure, I was really curious. So this is what I asked Claude Code. Hey, like how often it actually happens that we need to self-host models? And this came up as pretty infrequent thing, right? So in most cases, you don't really need this. But since here I was like more analyzing this on the cluster level, this falls within this infrastructure and platform cluster. Because if you have this use case, it kind of pops up too. But if you just zoom in on this specific like self-hosting models, this is not really common, right? In most cases, you just use the provider. Okay, and the most common words are build, deploy, design, teams, product, implement, develop, models, collaborate. Yeah, I think this is self-explanatory, right? So we engineers, we build. Yeah, and next I'll talk about use cases, but maybe I'll answer more questions. Let me actually check chat. I see that a lot of activity is happening there. So slides are available, and in fact, I don't even need to share them with you because they are already shared. You go here to slides, and this is the slide that I showed to you. So you will need to clone this repo because the images are not, if you just download it, the images will not appear there. I shared the link. I can share it one more time here, but this is the link to this repo that I shared. Maybe let me share it one more time. Just the link to the repo, because it would be nice if you also start the repo. So if you go here and click start, why I don't see my star? Anyways, yeah, please do that. It's really motivating to see this number of stars. And we have how many people on this call? 200? Yeah, slightly less. If all of you now go give a star, it will mean a lot to me. So please do this. Anyways, so yeah, I shared this. And if you go here to slides, you will see the slides, the pictures here. So then, I don't know, I can also send you a PDF after we finish. Okay, so what else we have here? Please recommend novel books. Like for these questions, yeah, recording will be available. For these questions, maybe it's better if you write them in here, right? So for me, going through all these new questions is not easy, right? So, and here I have just questions in, yeah, in one place, right? It's easier. So I'm not sure if I finish this. I'm pursuing Masters in AI while learning the foundation is great. What additional skills around I should add to my portfolio for the industry? I answered that, right? Maybe I would add that the way I would add the skills to my portfolio is through projects. So I would pick a project and I would try to implement this project end to end. And each time I would focus on one particular area. So, okay, now I'm picking this project. I don't know, let's say I want to analyze a GitHub repo. So, I don't know, scikit-learn. Scikit-learn is a fairly complex repo, right? So what if I want to build an agent that can analyze what is happening in scikit-learn? So then you build your agent, right? So that's one project, right? Then maybe you can build another project that takes a smaller scale repo. So something could be like, I don't know, Pydantic AI. Pydantic AI. GitHub. So Pydantic AI is my favorite agentic framework. And it's way smaller than scikit-learn, of course, but it's still not easy to understand what's happening there, right? So then maybe you take what you learned and build an agent for analyzing that. But since it will be less challenging to build an agent that is doing this exploration, you can do some other things here. For example, try to create some tests for this, or try to come up with a good evaluation set for that, or maybe deploy it, right? So create a Streamlit application and deploy it to the cloud, or maybe like set up CI/CD. So you have some tests. These tests run automatically. If they pass, this application is deployed to the cloud, right? And then maybe take another project, and in this project, you see, how do I deploy my agents to Kubernetes? So then you'll have like a bunch of different small portfolio projects. And the reason I recommend doing small projects instead of doing one big project is because when the project grows, focusing on one specific part becomes a bit more difficult, right? So let's say you want to focus on learning Kafka for ingesting data into your search engine for RAG, right? So then you just build a project around that, and then you have a small agent that is interacting with this. So the main focus is on the ingestion pipeline. Of course, if you have a project where all these things are needed, go for it. But I would think, okay, this is my learning path. These are the things I need to add to what I already have because I graduated half a year. In this half a year, I can learn this, and this, and this. So then for each project, I can set aside time for 1-2 weeks. And then I just focus on building this and this in this time, right? And then at the end, you'll have, I don't know, 5-6 projects that focus on different areas. And then you more or less have a good overview of different technologies. So this is how I would recommend going about adding skills to your portfolio. Are you teaching addressing the technologies you discussed, RAG agent tools like LangGraph and infrastructure like Docker and cloud like AWS in your next cohort? So thank you for asking this. Let me talk about my next cohort. So this is the course where I teach you to become AI engineers. But the focus here is on core skills. So focus here is on RAG, focus here is on building agent, focus here is on testing and evaluation and monitoring. So things like that. So this is what I call the core skills. And it's not really possible to cover everything, right? So I need to think, okay, what can I include? Because this course is already pretty large. There is so much content that I have to make many modules optional, right? So I think if we look here, so you see these stars, these are optional things. So for example, here, when we talk, there are many optional things like these projects, because it's not possible. And I just want to focus on AI engineering, and it's not possible to cram everything into one single course. So that's why here in the course, I focus only on the core AI skills, core AI engineering skills, and everything outside like Docker or I don't know, CI/CD, I don't cover here, or AWS. With AWS, I think I will cover it because like it shouldn't take a lot of time. Maybe I'll make one small lesson, but it will never be the focus. The focus is on teaching the core engineering skills. Because for me, the ideal profile for this course is a software engineer. So software engineer already knows Docker, already knows what CI/CD is, already knows tests. Of course, if you're not the ideal profile, it doesn't mean that you will not benefit from this course. But for you, it might be a little bit more difficult to understand things like testing, right? So you'll need to put more effort. But on the other hand, let's say if you're coming from data science background, for you, evaluation will be easier, right? But again, like this, I cannot cover everything. That's why the infrastructure part I have to put outside. So I focus on the core parts. But I'm thinking of creating a new course that actually focuses more on the core engineering things. And if you think this is interesting, you can let me know in any way you want. And then I perhaps can also make a course, but it will be also a course on Maven, and it will probably have the same kind of price. So it will not be free. And then when it comes to LangGraph and LangChain, I actually added a section about LangChain in this cohort. I do not like this framework, like at all. But since there is demand, I covered that. But I don't like it because it's very big and there are so many levels of abstractions there. So it's sometimes very difficult to understand what exactly is happening under the hood when it comes to LangChain. That said, LangChain was the first serious framework to appear, and they took the market, right? So because they were the first, there was also LlamaIndex, but I think LangChain was a little earlier or maybe a little bit more convenient. It's a good framework. There are many nice things that are there. So for example, it has the best chunking methods that you can find in any library. Most libraries don't even have this, but LangChain has. Right? LangGraph is I think from LangChain for for multi-agent interaction. This is something I also plan to cover. But again, this is not the main focus. And for me, I think so things like LangGraph and multi-agent systems, they may sound very fancy and cool. In reality, like I would focus on just making one single agent without like other agents, just making one single agent work well. And then, like once you know how to do this, like adding other agents who interact with this would not be very difficult, but also in many cases will not really be needed, right? So in many cases, just focusing on one single agent with a few very well-picked tools will work. Okay. How integrated are coding tools, Cloud Code, Google, and Gravity in the industry as present? Ooh, well, from I don't have an overview of the entire industry, but I regularly meet with people in Berlin and with people on conferences. Well, in conferences is less frequent, but in Berlin, yes. And very few people don't use any coding agents, right? And I mostly hang out with data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI engineers, sometimes with software engineers too. Very few of them don't use them yet. So I think it's pretty well integrated. But it's just, it's not for, it can do everything. Like as long as you, how to say, let me try to formulate my thought. So it's a tool for general software engineering, which can be helpful if you want to write front end, back end, infrastructure. It works. Can you please not spam? Yeah. So I think they are pretty integrated. And if you're like, I want to also ask yourself, like, why are you, I want to ask you, why are you asking this question? Like, is it because you want to learn these tools or you're just curious how they are integrated? Because if you want to learn these tools, I would recommend to do that. And it's not that difficult as it sounds. And I can also suggest a course that we run. This is a free course we ran some time ago. Like it finished like maybe 1 or 2 months ago, where we actually show how to build front-end plus back-end applications using tools like anti-gravity. So if you're interested, for some reason, Zoom decided that I want to send a GIF. Okay, so now send in the link. So if you're interested in learning these things, so I would suggest checking this. So the first 2 modules would be enough, right? And the first one is just an overview of what kind of tools are there. And in the second one, we build an end-to-end application with front-end, back-end, and we define specification in open API format. So then back-end and front-end can communicate. And then I also think at the end, we do CI/CD and deploy, right? So it's basically like the whole cycle, right? The whole like end-to-end thing. So if you want to learn about these tools, AI tools, I recommend checking it. What skills or tools should I consider for evaluating AI-generated work? I need more context to be able to answer that. So what do you mean evaluating AI-generated work? Do you mean you work on an agent and you want to make your agent better and you want to also quantify how good the output is, right? That's one thing. And the answer would be different from like if you just want to understand that somebody uses AI to write you an email, right? That's another thing. So for the first, I can answer you like for the first one, like you have an agent and you want to understand how this agent is performing. So then for that, you need to have this evaluation data set that we were talking about. So basically what you do is you collect what we call a ground truth data set, which has some input and some canonical expected output. And then you run your agent on this ground truth data set. And then let me maybe write this. So you have a table that looks like this. You have input, then you have expected output, right? And then, so this could be like, I don't know, ground truth CSV file, right? So you have input and expected output. And then you take your agent and then you do, I don't know, you run your agent on this. And then you have input, expected output, and actual output, right? So this is the output that is generated by the agent. output here. And now what you can do is you can compare the expected output with the actual output. And then you can have some sort of, I don't know, relevancy score, right? Which, like for this input, can it complete something? Okay. So for this input, like, I don't know, expected output was this, actual output was that, and then you say, okay, this is not relevant, right? But for this input, like this was relevant, right? And then you do this for, I don't know how many items you have. I don't know, 100,000. And then you just see, okay, this is my quality. So this is how, in general, you evaluate agents, right? But I'm suspecting AI-generated work, you probably mean something else. So maybe it's about detecting if you can, it's about detecting AI-generated content, right? That I don't know. But in general, yeah, this is how you do this. Yeah, probably you can train an LLM to distinguish, to separate LLMs from non-LLMs. How would you suggest using this information to secure a job at an AI startup? Should we build projects and include them in cold outreach emails? Okay, so building projects, definitely yes. Cold outreach emails, I don't know. So probably not the most effective strategy. So build projects, and the way I recommend people to build projects is to first think what kind of area, what kind of domain I am interested in. So you go to, I don't know, any website, and you look for AI engineer roles, right? And then you see, okay, these are the companies that are hiring. So you can open a few of them, and you can understand what kind of domain they are working in, right? So Zapier, I think I only know Zapier, I don't know others. But you can look at what kind of domains they are working on, and then you can think, okay, I see companies work in these domains. And by the way, you can actually use the data already scraped for that. And you can see, okay, I'm interested in this domain. So for example, I'm interested in e-commerce, or I'm interested in automation, or I'm interested in, I don't know, automotive, whatever. And then for, I don't know, let's say you picked e-commerce, or let's say you picked online marketplaces. So this is the company where I worked before, OLX.com. And OLX has, so this is an online marketplace, and they have a tech block. So then in some domain, so you picked a domain that you like, right? And then there are some companies that work in these domains. So they typically have their engineering block, right? And then you go to this engineering block, and you can see what kind of problems they are working on, right? So for example, here they're talking about hybrid search, like how exactly they are doing this hybrid search at OLX, right? And then, so what you can do is you can just understand what kind of problems they are solving, right? And then, okay, you can see that they are solving hybrid search, or they are, I have no idea what is that, or for example, recommender systems, right? And then you can understand, okay, like these are the things that these companies are working at. So how about I do a project in this area, right? And then you can think, okay, like recommender platform, what did they actually use for this recommender platform? And then you can check. I don't know, here they talk about scaling, so maybe this is not the most relevant article for that. But I guess you get the point, right? So you pick a domain by looking at the companies who hire in your area, in the area where you are going to look for a job, right? So you pick a domain, you analyze their tech blocks to understand what kind of problems they solve. And by the way, you can automate this easily, right? And then based on that, you can think, okay, this is the domain, these are the companies, and these are the problems I can solve. Let me come up with the simplest way to solve this problem in a project, right? What kind of data set I can use? Like, is there an existing data set for that? Or I need to generate a synthetic data set for that, right? And then this is how you build your project. So you can build 2, 3 projects. And why focusing on this specific niche is because when you can interview with them, and it's not like you're just going to interview with one specific company, you can interview with multiple, you always will have things to talk about. And by focusing on this specific area, on this specific niche, you will be able to instead of trying to do like everything at once, you will have focus in your projects, right? So these projects will be connected. They will have like a common story between them. So for you, it will be also interesting or easier to do this. And then when you have an interview, you can bring it up saying, hey, like I'm really interested in this domain and I build these projects. And then all of a sudden you have something to talk about, right? So because for them it's relevant, for you it's interesting. So now you can talk for the next hour instead of talking about random stuff. You can talk about the projects you actually built, right? And that's how I would go about picking projects. Uh, Second part about cold outreach. Don't know about that. I would actually go to meetups and talk to people. There are so many ways to communicate with people, unless you work in a small city and want to find a remote job. Yeah, but also you can. So there is this concept called learning in public. I'm going to share a link to that. I wrote an article about this recently. So in learning in public, you share everything you learn publicly. So every time you learn something, every time you build something, you tell people about that through social media, through whatever means possible. And then this way, you build some sort of awareness about your existence, right? And then if you see somebody is liking this post and they work at a specific company, it will not be a cold outreach when you ping them and say, hey, like, can we talk? It will not be cold outreach because they already saw you, right? They already interacted with your content. So instead of just, doing whatever random projects and then sending cold emails, I would recommend being more strategic about this and then also share everything you learn. So then it attracts people who work in the same industry, who work in the same domain, and then eventually build connections with them. If we talk about online, if we talk about offline, means attending different meetups and then talking to people there. So because you come there before the talks, usually there is this networking time while everyone is working for the talk or waiting for the talks. You can talk to people, and then afterwards too. And then you can say, hey, I'm shy. I'm not really into talking to people. I understand you. What you can do is you can speak at meetups. When you speak at meetups, people come to you. You don't come to them, right? So when I give a talk at a meetup, people come to me to ask questions. And then you say, okay, like, but what do I talk about? The answer is simple. You talk about the projects you built, right? Because you already picked a niche, you picked some projects you wanted to learn, you build these projects, so you have these projects now. Or maybe you're building on these projects, working on building these projects. So then you can share that, right? So there are 1,000 ways of doing this that are better than cold outreach. Anyways, I think I took a lot of time to answer this question. Um, I see that we have still 41 questions. So what I don't we don't have time to cover these questions now, but I will try to answer these questions. I will I will take a list. I will try to answer these questions and I will send the answers to these questions later as a follow-up. And also for me, it's very useful because these questions help me understand what kind of problems you have, what kind of problems, what kind of things are interesting for you, which helps me personally think, okay, what should I focus on when I build this kind of educational content? Or what should I include in the courses? Or what should I write about in the post? So thanks a lot for writing these questions. I'm sorry that I couldn't answer all these questions that you had. Even though we had 90 minutes, it was not easy to do that. But yeah, I did my best. We still didn't cover some things, like we didn't cover skills. We did not cover learning paths. So maybe this is something I can quickly show you. So I will not talk about this right now because it's been already some time that we talk. But there is this part about learning paths, right? And then it describes like what exactly, okay, I am an ML engineer. What do I do? I am a data engineer. What do I do? I am a backend engineer. What do I do? Here it's only like I was planning to talk about this, but I think for many things like that, I already gave you the answer. But here in this document, in this repo, you have these learning paths there where you can find a more detailed answer. So here It shows you what you already have and what you need to learn, and then you can focus on learning these things. And this is based on this analysis that I presented today. So this is data-driven. This is based on the actual job postings. And from what I see, I actually, with everything I presented from the data, I agree. So if you want to have something concrete, something actionable from this webinar today, you can take a look at this learning paths. And with that, I think that's all we have time today. Please start the repo. Also, I shared the link to my Substack. If you're interested in following me, I write regularly there. So you can subscribe to my posts there. And then there will be more sessions. The links to these sessions are in the repo at the bottom. So scroll down, you'll find the links, and I'll be happy to see you there. So that's it from me. Thanks a lot, and see you around. Okay, I'll share the GitHub link again, but this is going to be, I don't know, fifth time, if not more. And like, I don't know why people come here to spam. I don't understand. I don't approve. Akhil, I don't approve. Please don't do this. Okay, that's all I have. Bye. Slides are in the repo, right? You'll find them there, but I'll send the links to this. Okay, bye.